Welcome to the Rock is George podcast. I'm your host, George Dionne. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to hit like, follow, or subscribe on the platform that you're listening to us on. You can also check out my work at the loudest.com on the planet, knac.com, for exclusive hard rock and heavy metal interviews, live show coverage, album reviews, and more. My guest for episode 166 is musician Malcom Bruce. He is the son of the late bassist and vocalist of the British supergroup Cream. Malcom plays a big part in the upcoming release Heavenly Cream, an acoustic tribute to Cream, out on November 3rd through Quarto Valley Records. Together with a who's who of legendary rock and blues musicians, Malcom covers some of Cream's most well-known songs and fan favorites and even B-cuts. Joining Malcom on the release is Joe Bonamassa, Deborah Bonham, Paul Rogers, Peter Bullick, Nathan James, the late Bernie Mardsen, Maggie Bell, Rob Cass, Clem Clemson, and of course, members of his dad's band Cream, the late Ginger Baker, and longtime lyricist, the late Pete Brown. And here's Malcom Bruce to tell you more about it. So today we're talking about Heavenly Cream, an acoustic tribute to Queen, which comes out November 3rd on Quarto Valley Records. Before we get into the album itself, if I knew absolutely nothing about Cream, how would you describe the band's music to me?
Okay, it's a power trio. It's classic rock in the sense of the era that it came from, but it's got a little difference. Great songwriting rooted in the blues, but a band famous for its improvisational skills, stretching out material. Having said it's rooted in the blues, it's also my father's classical and jazz roots come through as an influence, and Ginger Baker, the drummer, was an incredible jazz drummer. So you kind of hear lots of disparate elements, but with obviously one of the great guitarists of our time, ERIC Clapton, playing as well. So yes, I don't know whether that's a simple explanation, and there's a lot going on in it, but they wrote some incredible hit records that have stood the test of time, are still played on the radio. They've become kind of blues rock standards, and it's one of a few bands that everything was built on subsequently. Cream, The Who, Zeppelin, the Kinks, I guess, the Stones, the Beatles. There's that kind of proto metal, proto hard rock. It was all rooted in these British bands that stole all the American music and resold it back to America.
I think one of the interesting things about Cream is they didn't put out a lot of music. There was 4 albums, but legendary players in your father, Jack Bruce, Eric Clapton, Ginger Baker, and Pete Brown, of course, a major contributor to this songwriting. Why do you think that this music has preserved over the decades with such little output, rather?
Well, I mean, I still think, like, looking back at how many songs they did produce in this tiny amount of time, 4 records, and just a 2.5-year existence. But so they did pretty well. They were pretty prolific, all things considered, I think, but I don't know. I mean, it's hard to pinpoint exactly. I think it's just timing, that there was a particular time in popular music where everything converged. The baby boomer generation, the hippie movement, exploring alternative ways of seeing the world, alternative ways of being. And there was a kind of just a little moment in time. I'm not sure that it lasted really. A little moment in time where there was that sense of possibility and people were taking risks in music and beyond. And they were kids. There's probably a little unconscious, naive, which is that's always quite useful for music, especially popular music. I think there has to be that innocence and the arrogance of youth, all of those things, And as I say, I think we're all it's a different world now. We're all much more cynical in that sense. You know, you know, we think of a record, you know, 18 months in advance, and, you know, we have to work with agents, and we have to, you know, come up with branding and come up with huge budgets to sort of push ourselves into the marketplace. And then it was just, hey man, I mean, I'm simplifying it because obviously there was still an industry, but the industry was a lot simpler then. And I think maybe there was less distance between being an artist and the public receiving that. And there was probably a little less content to wade through. So yeah, I mean, nowadays, how do you have a hit record, and how do you have a song that people even listen to more than 12 seconds of? If you're lucky, they get past the 2 adverts on YouTube before they get to hear the beginning of the song, if it's YouTube or whatever. Yeah, so I mean, we're confronted with so many things now, aren't we, in that sense? Like, even getting to listen to a song or getting to see a music video, we have kind of specialism, but we also have the markets kind of cornered by a corporate machine that, unless you're at the top tier of that, it's quite hard to compete. So yeah, simpler times perhaps means that those songs were more prevalent. But, you know, it's just different time, a different vibration in the universe.
So whose idea was it to put together this Heavenly Cream project? Was it Bruce Quarto at the label, or was it yourself or someone else? Let me fix my light first, though.
Oh, okay. I thought that was just mood lighting. Okay, so actually it was Pete Brown, the Cream lyricist, who I'm sure you know sadly passed away earlier this year. So Pete was talking to Mike Carden, who is the A&R guy at Bruce's label, Quarto Valley. They were talking about Pete Brown's documentary called White Rooms and Imaginary Westerns, which still hasn't seen the light of day. That's been coming forward for a while, which is a documentary about Pete's life in music and as a poet and as a songwriter and a lyricist. That documentary has Martin Scorsese, ERIC Clapton, my dad, Ginger Baker, like everybody that Pete collaborated with in his life is in that documentary. So that's coming out at some point. So they were talking about that, and then I think Pete and Mike started chatting about other possibilities and thought, well, hey, why don't we do an acoustic tribute to Cream, so that we're not competing with the original records. We're taking a fresh approach on the whole thing. And at that point, Pete got in touch with Mark Waters, who ended up being the director and editor of the documentary that goes alongside this record, Heavenly Cream, that's coming out at the same time, or I actually believe it's already streaming. That's called the Cream Acoustic Sessions. So that's a feature-length documentary. So he got in touch with Mark, got in touch with me, and Rob Cass, the producer. And then we just, from that point, we had our little core group, and we started reaching out to artists to see who might want to get involved. And we got Bernie Marsden, another guy that's just passed away, what a lovely, lovely person. So once we got Bernie, that started to open more doors, because everybody loved Bernie, and he had a friendship with Joe Bonamassa, which made it much easier for us to chat to him and see if he was up for doing it, which he was. Ginger, we all knew Ginger, so we contacted him, and he agreed to come in. So yeah, it was really Pete. Pete was the instigator.
You had some of these great musicians on the label. Deborah Bonham and Pete Bullick are on that label. Paul Rogers, some great people at Quarto Valley Records.
Absolutely. I mean, Paul, obviously incredible, legendary person. So it was great that he agreed to do it. And Deborah and Peter, yeah, I mean, Deborah's amazing too, and Peter's been around forever. Well, not forever. I don't want to say that. No, but actually, funnily enough, a friend of mine, Terry, a bass player who passed away quite a few years ago now, maybe 8 or 10 years ago, and a friend of mine was messaging me and sent me a photo of Peter with my friend Terry in a band in the, I don't know, 90s or something. So it's all full circle. Like, there's all these connections with everybody. So yes, I mean, Deborah Bonham, amazing, and I share a little bit of affinity with her in the sense that we're related to really famous people, but we're also doing our own thing too. So I kind of understand that that sentiment and how you balance that, your love and respect for your relatives, in her case her brother, in my case my dad, and balancing that with also going, I'm also a person too. So it's lovely, yeah, so it's lovely, and I think we were very lucky to get a really good group of people to contribute on the record, and everybody was there. It felt like the energy that everyone was bringing was really positive.
Did anyone reach out to Clapton?
Well, I think Pete did, and Eric decided not to do this record, but we actually just finished Pete's solo record called The Shadow Club before he passed away. So that's coming out next year on another label. And Eric does play on that record. So I don't know what Eric's thinking was, but from the outside, he was more than happy to contribute to Pete's record, which was an original, new songs, as opposed to covering himself on this record. So yeah, I mean, that's the thing, Eric's still out there performing and plays the Cream songs in his set and all of that kind of stuff. So kind of makes sense that he would not necessarily want to do this record, but the stuff that he did for Pete's record, I'm playing bass on that song. It's called The Shadow Club, and it's just gorgeous what Eric did. Lovely playing. So yeah, he's love Eric. Gotta love Eric. Amazing guy.
As you mentioned, Bernie Marsden and Pete Brown passed away earlier this year, so this kind of turns into a tribute to them, as well as a tribute to Cream.
Yeah, and Ginger, obviously this has been quite a long time in the making. We started back in 2018. By the time we were ready to launch, we sort of hit the pandemic in early 2020. So I think the label waited for what they felt was the right time. They were working other projects, and then decided to do it at this point. It feels great. So 5 years has passed, and Ginger passed away. Pee Wee Ellis passed away, who's also on the record from James Brown's band. So we lost quite a few people, and I think you're right. I think it's become a little historical document of these guys, these amazing people that obviously not only, this is a nice little project, but, they have all of their careers, and it's incredible what those guys achieved. And then we sort of captured them towards the end of their lives and careers. So yeah, it's really special in that sense that we, it's Ginger's final ever recording session, and it's in Abbey Road, and we filmed it professionally, properly, with a proper film crew. And so, it's a lovely document in that sense of the great Ginger. And he didn't let us down. I mean, the playing is gorgeous. It's absolutely beautiful what he contributed. So it's great.
You took on a large role on this project. You play multiple instruments. You sing. You do a lot here. Obviously, you're multi-talented. And did you start music at an early age and just kind of develop from one instrument to the next, and then eventually hone in your singing and whatnot?
Well, yeah, I'm still. It's a daily process for me of development as a writer, composer, or whatever you want to call it, but also as an instrumentalist. And so I'm practicing classical piano repertoire, and I'm studying harmony and counterpoint, and it's just an ongoing development. And I think that's what an artist tends to do. We tend to want to keep exploring and stay humble in that process. And I never think I've arrived at something, because I might have achieved one thing, but then the next thing opens up. And so yes, from a very early age, I mean, I was lucky, or it was just the way my life was. I was born into a family of, with music. That was what we did. We had pianos and guitars and basses lying around the house, and musicians turning up, and my dad playing. And then as I got older, I started playing with my dad, and playing music with him, and talking to him about music, and going to his shows. And so from around the age of 5 or 6, I think I started playing the piano around the age of 5. And then about the age of 9, I started playing the bass guitar, and then the electric guitar at the age of 10, etc., etc. So yeah, it's just always been part of my life. And by about 9, I knew that's what I was going to do. Was it a sensible choice? I don't know. It's not. It's a rocky road, the music life, in that sense. But I think if that's who you are, you have no real choice. Of course, I have done other jobs along the way at certain times when I've needed to survive. But that's all part of it too, isn't it? It's like you've got to have something to express as an artist. Depending on what kind of artist you are, it's interesting. I mean, it's a fundamental question. Is it art for art's sake? Art can be, the mechanics, the building blocks of harmony, and how notes go together, and the mechanics of that. But art can also be, about the human condition and struggle and experience. So it's quite subjective in that sense. But I think if we look through history, probably the greatest art has been created by people through struggle. And it's an awful thing to say, because I don't really want anybody to struggle, including myself. But I think whether it's the blues, and it brings a message of hope, actually. Ultimately, it's not about, I lost my woman and my home and my guitar too, but I've still got my love for the world and for the people in it, and still got that hope that'll see me through. And so that seems to be the sentiment in the blues from a conceptual point of view. But more than that, it's an emotional expression, isn't it? Really, I think. So all music, I don't know. It's really hard to pinpoint. But yes, from an early age, I was going to be a musician. It was inevitable, and if I'm going to blame anyone, it's my dad. So there you go.
So when you went in to record these songs, did you record as the group of musicians that appear on the song, or did everybody go in at different times and producer Rob Cash just buttoned it all up together?
Mostly we were all in the room together, and then, as is the case with modern recording, you tend to track as a group, and then fix things that might need fixing. Could I just replace that bar, and also sometimes you will want to redo the lead vocal, or overdub a guitar solo, or etc. So, but for the vast majority, we were all in the room together. So for the sessions with Joe Bonamassa and Ginger, we were in Studio 2, the famous Abbey Beatles room in Abbey Road. The only one that I wasn't with, as far as I remember, was Paul Rogers. He tracked his vocals separately, and I think that was just a practical consideration that he was probably in America. I think he was in America, so he did that in a separate studio. But the actual track, the rest of the tracks were all recorded at the same time. So Born on a Bad Sign that he sings on was tracked as a band, and then he put the vocals on top. Just don't tell anybody, that's all. No, but it's interesting, and especially we tend to, as you say, like when it's done like that, the producer puts it all together. That can be you can get an incredible result that way, but it is a different process. And I think we still haven't beaten that synergy of human beings getting into a room and breathing the same air and playing together, and what emerges from that is something with energy, with a certain kind of energy that's three-dimensional. So yeah, different processes, but we were lucky. We were lucky that we could go into Abbey Road, one of the great studios, and have some fun. And we did pretty good. I mean, we didn't mess around. Rob's good producer in that way. He's very kind of, okay, come on, what's next? But in a nice way, not in a sort of uptight way. But it's quite good to work like that. You do 2 or 3 takes of a song, and then you move on. You don't spend all month. Like, why don't we spend 6 weeks on the snare drum sound, and then I mean, there's famous stories of and they're brilliant records, but the famous stories of bands like Def Leppard recording guitar chords, each string separately. So you've got 6 strings on a guitar, but you would tend to strum a chord like that and record it, but they would strum the chord, they would play each individual note of this chord and multi-track it that way. I'm not sure if that's true, but if it is true, good on them, because the records sound great. Well, we didn't take that approach.
When it's someone else's money, it's easy to do stuff like that.
Yeah, and I mean, it was probably a different time. If it's the 80s, they were, oh, how much do you need to make a record? Oh, it's $742 million. Oh, okay, that's fine. Yeah, we'll write the check. But now it's it's a different world economically, and I'm making my own record. I'm in the middle of making a record at the moment, and I'm here in my little studio, and I've got Pro Tools on my laptop, and I've got some outboard gear and some guitars and amps and microphones, but I don't need to go. I mean, it's really great to go in a studio, and I do that to track certain things or drums or whatever. But a lot of the time you can save money these days by just having your own little home studio, and you can get it, as long as you know what you're doing, you can get a great sound. So it is a different game these days, because I guess partly because back in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, people were buying records, buying CDs, I sold 2 million CDs and whatever that equates to in terms of what the artist gets and what the record label gets. And now I think it's, if you get 1 million streams on Spotify, it's something like $3,000. So you can do the math, if you get 10 million, that's $30,000. So, to get 10 million streams on Spotify, I don't know. I mean, it's doable, right?
Maybe.
But that's still less than a guy working in Starbucks gets per year. So it's like, it's tricky. As a modern day artist, unless you're at the top level where you're selling out stadiums, it's a job. You're a working musician, and you have to diversify, and playing live is still where you make your, it's where you make your money. And obviously it's tricky. It's a tricky time to get people to come out to shows because of economics or whatever. But anyway, we remain positive, because what else am I going to do?
One of the surprising names, as far as musicians were concerned, I saw in here was Nathan James. I mean, a lot of the interviews I do are in the hard rock and metal category, and Nathan James is a big hard rock metal guy. It's in Inglorious and a bunch of other projects. How did he get pulled into all these blues and classic rock legends?
Well, I mean, Nathan's amazing. Well, the thing is with Nathan is that he plays that game, the hard rock game, because he's so great at it, but he's so diverse. He can do anything. He can sing pop, he's an actor, in that sense, and I think all great singers, well, a lot of great singers tend to be able to do that. They can jump in and out of different styles, modify their technical approach to singing, create different tones. He's just fantastic. So the first time I met Nathan was with Pete Brown. I curated a tribute to my dad in 2016 in London. We put on a show at Shepherd's Bush Empire, which is an iconic theatre venue in London, in West London. And myself and Pete spent sort of 9 months doing a similar process to this record, like reaching out to artists that had worked with my father. And we had Mick Taylor and Lulu and all kinds of amazing people, Terry Reid, loads of people that knew my dad and worked with him. And I think somebody just approached me at some point and said, hey, you should have Nathan on the show. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that guy from the X Factor, because he'd had a little bit of exposure on British television. And, and so we kind of said, yeah, okay, that's great. So he came and sang. We did a version of Spoonful with Gary Husband, the drummer, on playing drums, Steve Hackett on guitar, me on bass, Nathan singing. And then he also did something with Trevor Horn, who came along as well, the famous producer who's produced Seal and Frankie Goes to Hollywood and all kinds of people, and sang. Trevor himself sang with Yes at one point. So yeah, it was amazing and fantastic. And so from that point, we all just kind of stayed in touch. And when this record started to come together, I think it made sense to ask him. And I think Pete and Rob Cass, producer, reached out to him and he agreed to come in and do it. So it was great, you know. And yeah, he's fantastic. Again, he's like an underrated. I hope he gets where he deserves to be. You know, it's a funny time, isn't it? Like somebody with that kind of voice, you would imagine like everybody would be talking about him on a sort of world level. I think it could still happen for him. He deserves that kind of exposure. It's just strange, isn't it? Strange kind of everything's in little pockets. I traverse all of it in my own way, and I'm sort of do my own thing. So I'm not reading all the hard rock metal magazines. Maybe he is a big name in that scene.
He's getting there.
Yeah, I mean, Inglorious are fantastic. Every time I hear them, whenever they bring out a new record, I'm like, wow, that's really cool. So yeah, we were lucky to have him, and he's a great guy, and he's just, you know, as you know, he's one of those people that brings a really positive energy to anything he does. And so it was nice that he came in and did that with us. It was great. Yeah.
You mentioned there's a documentary that goes along with this. Is this a documentary that kind of shows you guys putting together this album, or is there a little more to it?
Yes, it's definitely filmed performances in the studio of us rehearsing, recording, etc. So that's really lovely that we've got, you know, Ginger Baker and Bernie and all these people that are no longer with us. But it's also interviews and fly on the wall footage. I mean, to be totally honest, I haven't seen it, and I'm a bit scared to watch it in the sense that I was there, you know, and I'll be like, no, can we do that again? How you edited it like that? No, you got my wrong side of my face. Can you just try a different shot there? No, like that's the problem with not being in complete control of everything. With something like this, it's interesting, and especially because it's so. There's going to be a lot going on in the documentary, so I've kind of taken the approach of, like some actors, I guess they would say, okay, I'm in the process. And I was really happy and satisfied with what I felt happened in that process. But I'm not going to actually sit down and watch the finished thing because I might get upset. But I hope people enjoy it. I mean, it certainly became this, you know, wonderful historical moment where all these people got together and made a little bit of magic. So, you know, I'm hoping that the document. I mean, I've seen little clips and it's great. It's beautifully shot. Johnny Depp apparently never watches his movies once he's finished shooting them. So, and there's probably other people that are similar. Like they just don't enjoy seeing themselves in that way. So, but yes, I'm sure there's lots going on in it. And it probably is quite insightful. It shows us all in a particular light. As we say, like breaking through the fourth wall, you know, so good luck when you watch it.
With this particular album, you're revisiting your dad's early career, but you also had the chance to contribute to your father's later solo career. You appeared on his albums from 2000 and 2014. So I'd imagine this was an enriching experience for you. Maybe not at the time, but looking back, that you had that moment with your dad.
Yeah, I think the sort of gestation of emotion, especially when you lose your parent, you know, I mean, it's something we all go through, or most of us do. That's the timeline of it, you know, and it's the right way to be. You know, your parents leave before you leave this physical plane. And then there's usually a processing of what that means as you gain some distance from it. And especially, I think, as you say, because I'm a musician and my father was a musician, and I did have the opportunity to work with him on quite a few of his records in the background in that sense. in a supportive role. Because I can write music, I would help with transcriptions or charts or whatever, but also played on a few of his records, and was just sort of generally around. So those memories do become very precious and special over time. It's hard. Yeah, I don't know whether I completely have an opinion about any of that stuff. I mean, it's just my life experience, because I also went to, had a nice curry with him sometimes, or went for a walk in where we lived with the dog, or, watched TV, watched a good movie, or, made music with him just at home, jammed, improvised, or, and sometimes he'd contribute to something I was doing as well. So, he just, I had a relationship with my dad, and, I love him and I miss him all the time because he had a particular sense of humor. Sometimes I do think, I wonder what he would think about where the world is at now, close to 10 years after he passed away. It's 9 years now. So yeah, it's interesting. Time, the notion of life and death, birth, death, what is it to be a human, what spirituality, these are the things that I'm reflecting on all the time, because I guess, I do yoga and I meditate, so I have a particular perspective within consciousness, and I'm reflecting on all of that. What is actually going on here? It appears like there's human beings with lives that are lived, but it's perhaps a little more complex than that, or a little simpler, let's put it that way. Maybe it's just consciousness kind of reflecting itself, objectifying conceptualization. But on a human level, I miss him greatly, because he brought so much to the way. He was a troubled person sometimes. He had addictions and challenges like we all do as humans. But what he gave to the world through his creativity was immense, in my opinion. And I think that's greatly missed, because we need that. I think it nourishes our souls. We need people that are bringing something that helps other people, whether it's even just a great song that gives somebody something in the moment. That can be life-changing. So yes, I have no idea what I'm talking about. But I think I do.
You mentioned it earlier. You're working on a solo album of your own. You have a tentative title out there, Fake Humans and Real Dolls. Why don't you tell us a little bit what to expect on this album?
Yeah, well, I think, it ties into what I've just been trying to express, in the sense that we are all collectively living in a very interesting time in history, where technology is coming more and more to the fore. It's affecting how we live our lives, how we think, how we experience things. We've got artificial intelligence now infiltrating all kinds of aspects of how we function. We've got crazy politicians and narratives left, right, and center, that we're supposed to adhere to. And if we don't, we're very naughty boys or girls, or whatever we're supposed to be called these days. And, we might get cancelled. This just like, I believe in sort of laissez-faire, or as the Chinese call it, wu wei, just let people be what they want to be, as long as they're not hurting other people. Why are we trying to control everybody and everything? I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, because that's a whole other thing. But just in real practical terms, there's a lot going on. There are a lot of different agendas and manipulative elements in the media, and manipulative elements outside of the media, and all kinds of energies crisscrossing, and fake things that we're supposed to believe in, and real things that we're supposed to think are fake, and all kinds of stuff. And it doesn't things happening in a dualistic concept, in a sort of right and wrong, black and white, instead of just being like, okay, I'm just gonna be me, and I'm going to be humble, and I'm going to be respectful, and I'm not going to try and tell anyone else what to think or do. So I mean, there's all of this stuff going on, and I think it's just a great time to attempt to express some of that. And it's challenging, so it's been a long time coming, but I think the record will be out next year, and I'll be touring, and that's really what I'm talking about. I mean, obviously the play on words, fake humans, real dolls, because it should be real humans, fake dolls. But also there are real dolls out there. If anyone cares to Google it, they will know what that is. I don't recommend it, no, but if you are curious, so there's a lot of stuff going on for all of us, and a lot of anger and war and inequality, but it doesn't have to be like that. Sometimes people say, oh, it's just human nature. It's an aspect of human nature, but we can transcend that. We can resolve that. We can, but we haven't quite figured that out yet. So humanity's still functioning in this kind of, I'm right and you're wrong. My God is better than your God. That means that my God told me I can kill you, like, whatever. Okay, man, if whatever you say, but please don't kill me. Like, it doesn't have to be like that. There's enough resources. There's enough, there's enough for everybody, and we can still have competition. We can still have a free market economy. We can still have all these things going on, but we have to, it's interesting. I'm not sure what you think, but I think it is an interesting time, because we're simultaneously at the most amazing moment in history, where we have so much potential on every level, but we're also kind of going backwards into, xenophobia and religious fundamentalism, and also denial of responsibility in terms of narcissism and codependency, and disconnection from the source of ourselves or spirit, or whatever we choose to describe it. So yeah, it's a really great time to try and write songs about what's going on.
I agree with the no consequences, nothing's my fault, and
don't upset me.
And this mantra that if you don't agree with me, I'm going to ruin your life.
Yeah, I mean, I've just been in a court case that I won with some people that I was collaborating with, who did exactly that to me, because they saw the opportunity to take something from me. So, and they, you think sometimes, and I don't, it's not that I need to talk about it, but sometimes you think, well, we're friends, and that means I can trust you, or we have an understanding. And there is a lot of that about where people can present themselves in a certain way, but that's not who they really are. And so I think but then I take full responsibility, because really, in hindsight, whenever those kinds of situations, I've been confronted with those kinds of situations, if I was really honest with myself, I was not respecting myself, because I was seeing those behaviors, but in denial that they were happening. Because that's another aspect to it. You can't be, oh no, no, of course they're not going to do that to me. Like, you can feel it, you can sense people's authenticity, sincerity, and but as an artist, I don't want to sound too pretentious, but as an artist, you don't want to lose the innocence, the childlike quality, because that's where the creativity emerges from. The innocence. You don't want to have an agenda in creativity, because then you're restricting the flow of that creativity bubbling up from the deepest part of yourself, which is what we all share. We all share the creative process. We're born, the physical bornness of the human condition is from something we don't even really understand, traditionally speaking. So yes, I take full responsibility for my life, but within that, we do have to take care of ourselves, and we do. there's a lot of negativity and darkness, or however we want to describe it. A lot of people that are not awake to sharing, or not awake to respect of boundaries or whatever, and behavior and mental health issues and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, but we're all part of it. So it's not about blaming other people either, you know, but it's but it is about that openness and transparency, and expressing oneself and being present. Anyway, I'm just learning all the time. So
fortunately, we have great music to help us get away from kind of those stresses of life and the things that tie us up. And you've presented a great tribute to your father's band Cream with Heavenly Cream, an acoustic tribute to Cream. Comes out November 3rd on Quarto Valley Records. Those are all the questions I have for you today, Malcom. I had a great conversation learning about this project and a little bit about yourself. And hopefully in the future, when your solo album comes out, we'll talk again.
That would be amazing. Thank you so much.
Once again, I want to thank Malcom Bruce for coming on the Rock is George podcast. Be sure to check out his latest release, Heavenly Cream, an acoustic tribute to Cream, out on November 3rd through Quarto Valley Records. Head over to your favorite music streaming platform. Take a listen to what's available. If you like what you hear, buy a physical copy. Support the artists. For all things Malcom Bruce, head over to his official website, malcombrucemusic.com. I also want to thank John Lappin of Lappin Enterprises and Quarto Valley Records for making this interview possible. You've been great. I've been George Dionne. Discover your next favorite artist on the Rock is George podcast.